Hello everyone, and welcome to 8-Bit Monster, where I create custom monsters for D&D 5th edition. In this episode, we won't actually be creating custom monsters for D&D 5th edition. What we're actually looking to do, or what I'm actually planning on doing, is reverse engineering monsters to see how they tick based off of the custom monster creation in the Dungeon Master's Guide. The reason I'm looking at this is because all too many times, many players skip what is considered the hell level, levels 1 through 3 for players. And instead of having players start at level 1 and progressing through and learning the character from the ground up, most of the DMs will skip to level 3, where it gets them out of the hell level, and life as an adventuring player or adventuring party isn't so dangerous where a flying snake could accidentally kill one of your players. Well, looking at these monsters and reverse engineering them, we're going to take a look at their base stats, not necessarily strength through charisma, but their armor, their hit points, and whatever weapons and attack bonuses they're using and getting. So we'll first look at the defensive combat rating, or CR for short, as most of you are well aware, and then we will follow up with the offensive CR, and then finally we will look at the final CR that Wizards and Dungeons and Dragons expects those monsters to be at. So let's start off by taking a look at the defensive CR, or the defenses of the monster. And in this particular instance, we're going to look at the Bandit. The Bandit can be found in a lot of low-level encounters where players will come across some seedy brigands traveling the roads or moving through forests and come across them during camps or while traveling on wagons or horseback or what have you. So your typical bandit carries a scimitar, light crossbow, and wears leather armor. Now they generally don't have a lot of hit points, but that's made up by the difference in the weapons that they have. So in most cases, the defensive CR is going to be lower, while the offensive CR is going to be higher. This is also an issue because this is where a lot of deaths for first and second level players come into effect. So, looking at the defensive CR, we're going to start off by looking at the effective hit points. To get the effective hit points, we strictly take the average. We're always going to be taking the average here, regardless of however many top or max or min hit points the monster is going to have, and comparing that to the armor class for the expected bonus. So in this case, D&D and Wizards have assigned 2d8 plus 2 hit points for our bandit. And that averages out to 11. And if you'd like to understand how they do that, they take half the die plus a half a point and multiplies that by the number of dice. Then they add the Constitution modifier. So for this instance, the bandit has a 2d8, so we take half of 1d8, which is 4.5, times that by 2, giving us 9. And then adding 2 for the Constitution bonus of plus 1 per hit dice, giving us 2, totaling out to an average of 11 hit points. This can go higher if you actually roll the hit points out, but it can also go lower. Every time I've attempted to roll hit points out for my monsters, I generally end up with lower hit points, unfortunately. So I've learned to just take the average to give my players a average encounter, unfortunately. So our bandit has 11 hit points. And if we look at the stat block for monster statistics by challenge rating, we take a look at the hit points column. And if we go down to where 11 hit points lands roughly, that will land us in the low end of the CR 1/8. So by taking that CR 1/8, we are effectively looking at our bandit at being hit point wise a CR 1/8 monster, which is pretty easy to defeat. Next we compare the armor that the monster is wearing, if they have any. So in this case, the bandit is wearing armor. Sometimes the monster will have natural armor, or in other cases it will be nothing at all and based solely on their dexterity modifier. So in this case, our bandit is wearing leather armor and has an AC of 12. If we look at the armor class column in the monster statistics by challenge rating, and we look for a 12, we actually find that there is no 12. So what does this mean? It technically means that our CR value of our bandit is actually less or worse than a 0. But because it's not on there, we don't have any monsters that ever come under CR 0, just remember 12. And then we compare that to where our monster should be. So we go back to our hit points and we found that our monster is expected to be a CR 1/8. We then compare that to the armor class for an expected CR 1/8 monster, and that monster should have a 13. Now we have to do a little bit of math here, but it's real basic algebra, so nothing too crazy. And we just take the expected armor class and subtract it from the actual armor class. So in this case, we have like a -1 difference, or there's a 1 point difference in armor class. Now, based off of the rules in the Dungeon Master's Guide, anything that is plus or minus 2 compared to the hit points CR value will actually adjust our monster's defensive CR value. So in this case, since our monster is wearing leather armor and doesn't go beyond 12 and is expected to have an AC of 13, we don't make any adjustments to the defensive CR value of our monster, and effectively our monster has a defense value of 1/8. So our bandit with 11 hit points on average, wearing leather armor, giving us a 12, is a CR 1/8 monster defensively. So next we're going to look at the offensive combat rating of our monster. And this is where things get a little crazy. Unfortunately, most of the times, our monsters have a much higher value. And in other videos, I will show this, especially with our ever-lovable goblin and the trait that the goblin has for nimble escape. That trait is pretty nasty, but that will be discussed in a later video. Going back to our offensive CR, our bandit is using a scimitar and light crossbow. What the rules in the Dungeon Master's Guide suggests us to do is to take an average of 3 combat rounds worth of damage. And this doesn't take into account if the bandit misses or the monster misses or hits all of them. It's just an average of what the monster could do on any given good day. So let's say our monster here, the bandit, actually does hit all 3 times in the first 3 rounds of combat. The question is it going to be using its light crossbow all the time, or is it going to be using the scimitar all the time? We kind of have to just take this as a real perfect scenario, like a perfect storm for this monster, and go, okay, our scimitar is using an average of 4 damage per round, and our light crossbow is doing an average of 5 damage per round. So, in effect, our bandit would want to use the light crossbow every round of combat until they run out of crossbow bolts. Once they run out of crossbow bolts, sure, they're going to use their scimitar next. So from there, we're going to suggest that in the first 3 rounds of combat, this bandit is going to use the light crossbow. So because of averages, like I explained before with the hit points, the light crossbow is doing 5 points of damage per round. Now, if you had fluctuating damage, or spells, or abilities, you would take the average of the best case scenarios, for instance, a dragon breath, or an AoE spell, or anything else that could potentially do even more damage. For this instance, because the bandit is very basic, no traits, just has a couple weapons and slogs through the mud and tries to steal from you, it's only going to have those 5 points of damage every round because it doesn't do multi-attacks and it doesn't have any other ability to do damage besides these 2 weapons. So for this instance, normally you would add 5 plus 5 plus 5, giving you 15, and then dividing by 3 for the average of 5. So we know that our monster is doing 5 damage on average per round. Sure, they could also be doing more damage or less damage when rolling, or if you just take the averages, which some DMs suggest you do in later levels, maybe 7 and beyond or 10 beyond, it just gets to a point where averages are easier. This is the amount of damage that the monster is going to do, 5 points. So now we're going to calculate our offensive CR. And to do that, we go and start at the damage per round column in the monster statistics chart. So this time, we go down and we find that there is the column of 4 to 5 damage per round. If we go all the way over to the left and find our CR value, we know that because the bandit on average, regardless of the scimitar or the light crossbow, because they're either doing 4 or 5 points of damage, our monster is attacking at a CR value of 1/4. This is actually a step up than the defensive CR value of 1/8. Now that we're done looking at the damage per round, next we need to look at the attack bonus, and this is similar to the armor class, and this will help us determine if our monster's CR value needs to go up, go down, or stay the same. So luckily, our monster has a +3 bonus to hit for both the scimitar and the light crossbow, and we don't have to really worry about averaging out that number. So we take a look at the attack bonus of 3, and we compare it to the attack bonus column. Now luckily, our monster has a huge range of levels, or CR levels, that it can be +3 to attack bonus. So from 0 to CR value 2, our monster is allowed a +3 bonus, and this attack bonus does take into account the proficiency bonus as well. The 3 comes from a +2 proficiency bonus and a +1 dex bonus because the light crossbow and the scimitar both are dex-based weapons. So we take that +3 bonus, we look at the CR 1/4 for its damage round, +3 bonus for the attack bonus, compare that to the 1/4 CR for the 4 to 5 damage per round, and see that this is exactly where the monster, in this case the bandit, should have an attack bonus. So we don't need to worry about adjusting the levels for this bandit. So now that we have our offensive CR value of 1/4 and our defensive CR value of 1/8, we now need to average them out and find our final CR value. Now, this is a tricky part because sometimes, actually a lot of the times, we end up with decimals or fractions. So this turns out to be probably the most annoying part of making custom monsters and reverse engineering D&D's monsters. Here we have the offensive CR of 1/4, adding it to the defensive CR of 1/8, and dividing it in half. And that final result is 3/16. So our monster is quite literally right in half of CR 1/8 and CR 1/4. Now, by D&D's rules, we always round down. And I think this is why the challenge rating of the bandit is actually 1/8. I would claim that because of the attack damage that this bandit can put out, I would round it up. So in the end, I think personally that the bandit should be labeled a 1/4 monster and be worth more experience, purely based off of the attack damage that this creature can output. D&D and Wizards and others might suggest that it shouldn't be, and it should actually be the 1/8 because it has so low hit points, and that only a couple attacks can kill the bandit very quickly. It's a tricky situation, and you as a DM or a player can argue these points, and if anything, we just kind of use the values in the DM's guide. There's some things to take into consideration when using these monsters with your players, and this is why DMs generally just skip the hell levels and go right to level 3. Anyways, I hope you found this interesting and liked the video. I think it's great information to really understand and helps you flesh out a better D&D game. So like, subscribe, do all that nonsense. Come join me next time when I explore another monster to see what happens next. Thanks. Take care. Bye.